So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. It was tense and easy to read. In fact, it might even be one of my favourite thrillers that I've done so far for Panic at the Book Club, partially because of how easy it is to read and enjoy. Hi everyone, my name is Tahereh and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our Panic at the Book Club book of the week, which is Do No Harm by Jack Jordan. If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message. Anna's son has been taken, and she's been given a choice: kill a man on the operating table, or never see her son again. The man lies on the table, and as a surgeon, it's Anna's job to save him, but as a mother, she knows she must kill him. You might think she's a monster, but really there's only one choice. She must get away with murder, or never see her son again. This is a spoiler-free part, where we'll discuss any spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video, which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. First things first, those chapter lengths. They were definitely on the smaller side in this book, most of them being somewhere between 5 and 10 pages, but considering the multiple POVs, I really appreciate it. It kind of meant that you never spent too much time with one character, getting caught up in all of the details in their plot and then suddenly getting dumped into another. It definitely kept it more fast-paced. The book was from Anna the surgeon's perspective, as well as one of her colleagues Margot and a detective called Rachel. All 3 POVs were pretty fresh in your mind and really easy to follow, and coming from someone who generally prefers a single point of view, it did provide some otherwise much needed context. I think if it had been from just Anna's perspective, I'm not sure it would have been enough, probably because of the book having such a limited pool of prominent characters. In all honesty, I know next to nothing about heart surgery, and considering I studied design and fine art, it'd be really weird if someone did expect me to, but although the book didn't have a ton of technical information, it certainly had enough that the author clearly did his research. I think it had a really good balance between the technical side of things and not completely boring the reader with information they didn't know. So, on Storygraph, when you're leaving a review, it asks you whether or not the book was either plot or character driven, and usually I would put that it's a mix, but I think that this one was a brilliant example of a book that was mainly plot driven. You know, wanting to know what's happening, why, and what's going to happen next. While the characters were compelling, they were flawed and not always all that likable. I think they were written really well. 3 totally different women with their own problems going on, and I certainly felt a range of emotions for them, mostly being sympathy and frustration. It was quite tense, and I found myself speeding through it at the end. I think it definitely could have been a more complicated book with more context and world building, but I also really just enjoyed it for what it was. Like, it was a little over the top, it had me rolling my eyes and shouting at the characters, but at the same time it also kept me turning those pages until well into the night. If I had to compare this to any other book, it would probably be something like The Passengers by John Mars, or 5 Survived by Holly Jackson, or No One Saw a Thing by Andrea Mara. Although they're all very different books, they all have that tense, on the clock, life or death kind of vibe. Now moving on to that part of the video where I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first, because beyond this point there will definitely be spoilers. None of the characters were actually all that likeable. I mean, I didn't totally hate Anna. She had changed quite a lot throughout the book, and I kind of felt a little bad for her in the end. She did all of that to save her son, only to end up feeling like, well, not like he hated her, but kind of like he felt indifferent. Like she thought that maybe he wouldn't even care if she got hurt. I mean, I just felt bad for how it may have affected the kid and how it may have affected their relationship. But then again, we never really saw what they were like before he was kidnapped, and you could quite easily imagine that perhaps their relationship was distant before events. Anna's condition with the hair plucking was certainly an interesting one. I mean, for me, with someone with a history of SH, it was odd because until I compared it to an impulse like that, I really didn't understand it. And for a moment, I kind of felt like I got to saw what it was like for my friends who saw me go through all of that. It was actually Anna eating the eyelashes afterwards that kind of freaked me out a little bit. I knew that plucking was a thing, but I'd never heard of that before. I was pretty shocked to find out that she'd actually set up Margot's death. I mean, it was cold-hearted, but I do get it. Like, Margot probably would have just continued to blackmail her anytime she needed a payday. Margot's character was probably the one I changed my mind about the most. From the very beginning, she was just this frustrating character that you just wanted to shake. Like, she seemed genuinely remorseful about stealing things from her colleagues, and although she was in the wrong and assumed that they could do without these things, I felt like I could understand her predicament. But then as more was revealed, you saw this sense of entitlement grow. She was quick to blame everyone and cared about no one and never took responsibility for anything, often blaming her family. I mean, after reconnecting, her brother did nothing wrong. I mean, he helped her out, but she just took him for granted and actually planned to screw him over. Blackmailing someone is bad enough, but then doubling down when you find out that her son is kidnapped is like the icing on the cake. I mean, if that wasn't going to make her stop and reevaluate the situation, then she probably would have just returned for more later on. Also, when she gets her first lot of money from Anna, she goes on to say how she's kept it in a safe place, which is on her person at all times, and I just want to point out that that's precisely how she lost the first sum of money right at the very beginning. She was super self-destructive, and every decision she made was just a terrible one, although she certainly didn't deserve what she got in the end. After everything, it wasn't all too surprising. Despite all of that, Rachel was actually the one that pissed me off the most. At the end, after she discovered that Zach was actually okay, even though we knew that her suspicions were fairly spot on, I did feel quite bad for her. But other than that, like, 98% of her parts, I was more just frustrated at how much of a terrible detective she was. Like, she wasn't even the one who gathered most of the evidence, she was just throwing around wild accusations. Like, I get that she was fairly traumatized by her own past, but she knew her investigation probably had ties to organised crime, and yet she didn't for a second think that if the child had in fact been kidnapped, then perhaps Anna was being threatened to keep quiet and not tell the police. Like, instead of suspecting that Anna didn't tell the police because her and her son were being threatened, she jumped straight to Anna being a terrible mum who wouldn't possibly have a reason to not tell her everything, and it was just really infuriating. So as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. It was tense and easy to read. In fact, it might even be one of my favourite thrillers that I've done so far for Panic at the Book Club, partially because of how easy it is to read and enjoy. It was suspenseful while also being fairly dramatic. And will I be reading any more from Jack Jordan? Definitely. At the end of Do No Harm, there was actually a section from one of his other books called Conviction, which sounded really interesting, and I believe he's got a fair few other books out there as well. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? Next week we'll be discussing Shatter by Tahereh and Mafi. I do apologise if I've butchered that name, but don't forget to leave your comments and thoughts before Monday the 26th of August at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok or Instagram. The following week will be When the Moon Hatched, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below, along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, it's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye!